I came back from the feed store with a sack of corn under one arm and a thermos of coffee in the other, only to find a neon orange sticker slapped across the windshield of my tractor like a parking ticket from hell. It read towing scheduled in 24 hours for non-compliance. The only problem was this tractor was parked in the middle of my own dang farm. And I don't live in a subdivision. I live on a 47-acre plot of agricultural land 5 miles from the nearest stop sign. That was the moment I realized something was off and something was about to blow up bigger than a field fire in July. At first, I stood there blinking at the sticker like my eyes had betrayed me. I set the sack of corn down real slow, trying to process what I was looking at. My John Deere wasn't blocking a road or sitting on HOA property. It was parked next to the barn like it had been for the past 10 years. There wasn't another house in sight except the cows, who looked at me like I was the crazy one. Then I heard tires crunching gravel behind me. I turned to see a white SUV with a magnetic sign that said Neighborhood Compliance Patrol rolling up my private drive like it had a legal reason to be there. 3 people in matching polos stepped out with clipboards, squinting like they'd just walked into enemy territory. I walked over and said in the calmest voice I could muster, "You folks must be lost." The oldest one, a red-faced man with a sweaty upper lip, replied, "Actually, sir, we're here on behalf of the Green Pines HOA. We've received multiple complaints about unregistered farming equipment being stored on HOA-managed lot." I stared at him for a second, then burst out laughing. I couldn't help it. Green Pines is a gated development a mile down the road, and the last time I checked, their HOA stopped at the fence line. I gestured behind me and said, "This isn't an HOA lot. This is my farm. Zoned agricultural since 1942. You're standing on land where cows outnumber people 5 to 1. The woman next to him flipped her clipboard and said, "According to our updated district expansion map, this parcel now falls under our jurisdiction." She pointed to a color-coded document like that settled everything. I didn't know whether to laugh again or call the sheriff. "District expansion," I repeated. Without my consent, without county notice, without so much as a knock on my door, they nodded like they were performing a sacred duty. I asked them real careful to get off my property before I brought out my attorney or my bull, whichever showed up first. By the time they got in their SUV and drove off, I was already calling the zoning office. While the phone rang, I walked around the tractor taking pictures of the sticker. I had a bad feeling this wasn't just a mix-up. When the zoning clerk answered, she confirmed what I already knew. My property was still zoned agricultural. No HOA claim. No pending reclassification. No map changes. I thanked her and hung up, but the pit in my stomach stayed. This wasn't about map. This was about power. That evening I talked to my neighbor Joe, who owns the goat farm down the road. He said he'd seen the same white SUV parked on his land a few days ago. They didn't confront him but left a flyer about noise ordinances and fencing restrictions. Joe laughed it off until his fence got a mysterious citation taped to it. He figured it was a prank. Now I wasn't so sure. The next morning I stopped by the county recorder's office. The lady behind the desk recognized me and raised an eyebrow when I said I needed zoning map. I showed her the flyer and the sticker photo. Her face changed. "That HOA's been trying to push its limits lately," she said. "They keep filing zoning expansions and nuisance complaints hoping no one checks the paperwork. Most people just give in to avoid a fight. But not you." I smiled. "No, not me." I spent the next hour pulling every record I could find. My farm hadn't changed zones since the Roosevelt administration. I printed copies of every document I could get my hands on, then drove home and posted a laminated sign on my front gate. Agricultural property, no trespassing, no HOA access. But it wasn't over. That evening I saw them again. Same white SUV, same 3 clipboards. This time they parked right at the edge of my drive and took pictures of my barn. I didn't say a word. I just waved and smiled while holding my phone up to record. One of them noticed and quickly ushered the others back into the vehicle. As they pulled away, I caught a glimpse of a new sticker in the passenger's hand. Back inside, I called the sheriff. I explained the situation and asked what my legal rights were. He chuckled and said, "As long as your land is zoned agricultural and you've posted signs they're trespassing. Next time they step past your gate, give me a call and we'll have a little chat." That night I didn't sleep much. My phone buzzed just after midnight. A trail cam I'd set up near the back pasture triggered. I opened the footage and saw headlights. Someone was back there walking along the fence line with a flashlight. They didn't step onto my land, but they were close. Too close. I saved the video and added it to the folder I'd started keeping. This wasn't just a misunderstanding anymore. This was a targeted campaign. They were trying to push me out one fine at a time. But I'd spent my whole life digging into this land. I wasn't going anywhere. If the HOA wanted a fight over my tractor, they were going to get one. And by the time I was done with them, they'd wish they'd never left their pretty little sidewalk. The morning air was thick with dew and tension as I climbed into my truck and headed toward the county recorder's office again. I had barely slept after the trail cam footage came through. The idea of strangers wandering near my fence line in the dark had stirred something inside me, something older than pride and sharper than fear. It was the same thing that kept my grandfather plowing this land through droughts and recessions. I wasn't about to let some clipboard warriors with fake authority push me off my own soil. I needed proof, and I needed leverage. If they were going to play dirty, I was going to play smarter. At the county building, I waited in line behind a couple arguing about dog permits before finally reaching the clerk's desk. She was the same woman from yesterday, and when she saw me, she gave a knowing smile like she'd half expected I'd be back. I asked to see the full record of zoning boundaries for my plot and anything filed in the last 6 months involving the Green Pines HOA. She disappeared into a back room and returned with a thick manila folder. I opened it slowly, flipping through years of paperwork until I found a set of documents marked as pending. It was a map with a shaky red outline that stretched past Green Pine's original boundaries and into parcels that clearly didn't belong to them, including mine. It had no county seal, no approval signature, and no accompanying zoning change application. My breath caught. This was it. They were filing fake expansion notices without going through legal channels, counting on no one to challenge them. I asked the clerk if this map had been processed. She shook her head. Not only was it invalid, it had been submitted improperly. No public notice, no hearing, no vote. Just a quiet little drop in the suggestion box, like they thought the county would rubber stamp it eventually. I asked if I could have a certified copy, and she handed one over, adding that I should keep it somewhere safe and consider contacting legal counsel. I already had someone in mind. I called my cousin Robbie, who worked as a rural property attorney out of state but kept his license valid here. He picked up on the first ring, and when I explained what was happening, he didn't sound surprised. He told me this kind of overreach was becoming more common. HOAs were expanding like weeds, trying to snag extra land to boost their dues revenue and property control. He told me to gather all the documents I could, photograph every incident, and start a timeline. He said if I could prove a pattern of harassment and illegal action, the county might not be the only authority interested. As I left the recorder's office, I got a call from Joe again. His voice was low, like he was whispering. He said someone left a violation notice on his barn gate during the night. It accused him of improper fencing and excessive animal noise, threatening fines of up to $5,000. He asked if they had a right to do that. I told him no and promised to swing by with the documents I'd just picked up. It wasn't just my farm anymore. These people were trying to absorb the entire outer ring of properties around Green Pines. The more I dug, the uglier it got. I stopped by Joe's place before heading home and showed him the zoning proof. His hands were shaking as he looked through it. He wasn't a fighter by nature. He raised goats, made cheese, and played the banjo. He didn't know what to do with bureaucracy and threats. But when I told him he wasn't alone, that I'd stand with him if things escalated. Something shifted in his eyes. We made copies of the maps and notices and split them among a few other neighbors. By sunset, 5 of us had agreed to start tracking every HOA visit, photo, or flyer. If they wanted to poke the hornet's nest, we were going to sting back. When I got home, I found another notice stuck to the post of my front gate. This one was even bolder than the last. It claimed my barn violated HOA structure appearance guidelines and demanded I repaint the east side to match the green pine's neutral color palette. I stood there for a long minute, letting the absurdity sink in. Then I laughed so hard I nearly dropped my groceries. They wanted me to paint my working livestock barn beige. On a farm. In the middle of nowhere. I didn't touch the notice. I took pictures, added them to my file, and then drove 3 stakes into the ground by my driveway. I attached 3 signs to them. One said private agricultural land. One said not subject to HOA authority. The third one just said beware of bull. I meant the animal, but it worked both ways. The next step was installing better surveillance. I picked up 2 motion cameras from the hardware store and positioned them on opposite ends of the pasture. One covered the road, the other faced the barn. I connected them to a backup battery and made sure the footage uploaded to a cloud account. If they were going to sneak around again, I'd have footage from multiple angles. I also added floodlights with motion sensors. If anyone got too close at night, they'd light up like it was high noon. Later that night, I got a knock on the door. It was Sarah, the local news reporter who occasionally covered zoning disputes and rural issues. She said she'd heard from someone at the recorder's office that a farm had been targeted by HOA expansion. I invited her in and showed her everything I'd gathered. She asked thoughtful questions, took notes, and snapped a few photos of the sticker still stuck to my tractor window. She said she'd been waiting for a story like this to hit her desk and that this was bigger than it looked. She promised to follow up in the morning and left just as the sun was dipping behind the ridge. I stood on my porch as darkness fell, listening to the distant hum of crickets and the occasional lowing of the cows. The land was still, but my gut told me the quiet wouldn't last. The HOA had crossed a line, and now they were trying to clean it up with threats and fake fines. They had no clue what kind of storm they'd stirred up. I had paperwork, evidence, and neighbors rallying together. They thought I was just some farmer too busy with tractors and hay bales to fight back. What they didn't know was that I had spent my whole life fighting for this land, and I wasn't about to let anyone take it away without a war. I woke up to the sound of an engine idling outside my window. For a second, I thought maybe one of the neighbors had swung by early, but when I stepped out onto the porch with my coffee, I froze. A flatbed tow truck was parked at the edge of my gravel drive, engine running, the driver still in the cab tapping something on a digital tablet. And right behind the tow truck was that same white SUV with the magnetic compliance patrol sign. They had returned, and this time they brought backup. I didn't see the usual 3 clipboards yet, but I knew they were close. My tractor was still parked beside the barn, same spot it had been in for years, and now it was apparently the target of a full-blown towing operation. I didn't run. I didn't yell. I just walked straight to the barn and climbed up onto the tractor seat like it was any other morning. I twisted the ignition and let the old John Deere rumble to life, puffing out a cloud of gray smoke. I sat there sipping coffee, engine humming beneath me, eyes locked on the tow truck driver who looked increasingly nervous. Within a minute, the 3 HOA officers came marching across the gravel, all dressed in matching tan shirts, 2 of them now wearing little name tags and earpieces. The man in front raised his hand and yelled over the noise of the engine that I was in violation of vehicle storage guidelines and refusing compliance would result in further escalation. I replied with one word: no. The woman on the right waved a clipboard like it was a weapon. She shouted that I was on HOA-managed property and my vehicle was subject to removal. I pointed to the ground and said I hope you brought a map, because this land is still mine and I've got the zoning paperwork in my kitchen drawer if you need a refresher. The tow truck driver stepped out of his cab at that point and made his way over, looking unsure of himself. He asked to see